The crystalline spires of Harmonia Research Station glinted like diamonds against the purple sky as Dr. Nadia Patel's shuttle made its final approach. After 3 years of intensive study and preparation, she was finally here, the first human xenobiologist to be granted full access to the mysterious crystal forests of the Ventari. The landing bay doors parted like petals of a mechanical flower, admitting her small craft into the climate-controlled interior. As the atmospheric pressure equalized, Nadia took deep breaths to calm her racing heart. Everything she'd worked for led to this moment. "Welcome to Harmonia Station, Dr. Patel." A warm voice greeted her as she descended the shuttle's ramp. Director Duran, a tall man with silver-streaked hair and laugh lines around his eyes, extended his hand. "I trust your journey was comfortable." "As comfortable as 2 weeks in deep space can be," Nadia replied with a smile, shaking his hand. "I'm just eager to begin my work with the crystal forests." "Ah yes, your enthusiasm precedes you. I've reviewed your proposals. Quite revolutionary thinking there." He gestured toward the station's interior. "But first, there's someone I'd like you to meet." As they walked through the station's curved corridors, Nadia couldn't help but marvel at the architecture. The walls themselves seemed alive with shifting patterns of light, a perfect blend of human and Ventari design aesthetics. They entered a large chamber where a being unlike anything Nadia had ever seen awaited them. The Ventari stood nearly 7 feet tall, their crystalline body structure catching and refracting the room's light in mesmerizing patterns. What appeared to be hair was actually thousands of tiny crystal filaments that chimed softly with each movement. "Dr. Patel, this is Rylith, one of our most accomplished crystal keepers," Director Duran introduced. "They will be your primary partner in your research here. Your arrival brings great joy, Dr. Patel." Rylith's voice resonated like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Few humans have shown such deep understanding of our crystal forest's true nature." Nadia bowed slightly, remembering her cultural training. "The honor is mine, Keeper Rylith. Your people's connection to the crystal forests has revolutionized our understanding of silicon-based life forms." "Come," Rylith gestured with a crystalline hand that sparkled with internal light. "Let me show you what you'll be working to preserve." They made their way to an observation deck overlooking the crystal forest. Nadia's breath caught in her throat at the sight. Stretching to the horizon, countless crystalline trees reached toward the purple sky, their branches capturing and refracting sunlight in rainbow cascades. But among the beauty, she could see the signs of decay. Entire sections of the forest had grown dull and lifeless. "The deterioration is spreading faster than we anticipated." Rylith's voice carried a note of sorrow. "Our traditional methods of preservation are failing. That is why we sought help from Earth's scientists." Nadia pressed her hand against the observation window, her mind already racing with possibilities. "Tell me everything you know about the deterioration pattern. When did it start? How does it spread?" As Rylith began explaining, Director Duran watched the interaction with approval. Here was why he'd fought so hard to bring Dr. Patel to Harmonia. Her genuine passion for understanding and preserving the crystal forests matched the Ventari's own dedication. Over the next few hours, Nadia absorbed everything Rylith shared about the crystal forest's life cycle. The Ventari's relationship with the forests went beyond simple cultivation. It was a profound symbiosis that had shaped their entire civilization. "Our ancestors first emerged from these very forests," Rylith explained, their crystalline form shimming with emotion. "We are as much children of the crystal as we are its keepers. If the forests die, they won't," Nadia stated firmly. "I promise you, Rylith, we'll find a way to save them. Human and Ventari science together. There has to be a solution." As the purple sun set, casting the crystal forest in deep amethyst shadows, Nadia knew she was exactly where she needed to be. This wasn't just about preserving an alien ecosystem. It was about protecting the heart of an entire civilization. The weight of that responsibility settled on her shoulders, not as a burden, but as a challenge she was ready to face. In her temporary quarters that night, surrounded by research equipment and data pads, Nadia began formulating her initial study plans. The crystal forest's deterioration pattern suggested some kind of resonance disruption. Perhaps something was interfering with the natural harmonic frequency that kept the crystalline structures alive and growing. As she drifted off to sleep, the gentle chiming of crystal wind chimes outside her window seemed to whisper of hope and possibility. Tomorrow, the real work would begin, and with it, perhaps the start of something revolutionary in human-venturi relations. 3 weeks into her research at Harmonia Station, Nadia found herself facing an unexpected obstacle, not in her scientific work, but in the form of Elder Thylux, whose crystalline form cast sharp, intimidating shadows across the conference room. Absolutely not. The Elder's voice rang out like struck crystal. Your proposed solution threatens thousands of years of traditional crystal tending practices. We cannot allow such radical intervention. Nadia stood her ground, datapad clutched firmly in her hands. The holographic display between them showed her proposed harmonic resonance enhancer, a device that could potentially restore the crystal forest's natural frequency. Elder Thylux, with all due respect, the traditional methods are no longer sufficient. The decay rate has increased by 30% just in the time I've been here. Rilith stepped forward, their crystalline features catching the light in a way that Nadia had learned indicated concern. Perhaps, Elder, we might consider a controlled test of Dr. Patel's device, in a small, isolated section of the forest. The Elder's crystal filaments chimed discordantly, a sign of disapproval that Nadia had come to recognize. You young ones are too eager to embrace foreign methods. These forests survived for millennia under our care. But they're not surviving now. Nadia pressed, pulling up another hologram showing the decay's progression. Look at these readings. The harmonic disruption is spreading exponentially. If we don't act soon, there won't be any forests left to tend. Director Duran, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke up. Elder Thylux, perhaps we might arrange a demonstration. Dr. Patel's research is built on a foundation of understanding and respect for Venturi crystal tending traditions. The Elder's crystalline form shifted, refracting light in complex patterns that Nadia was still learning to interpret. After what felt like an eternity, they spoke again. You may demonstrate your device on a single crystal sapling, under my direct supervision. It wasn't ideal, but it was a start. Nadia bowed respectfully. Thank you, Elder. I won't disappoint you. Later that evening, as Nadia and Rilith prepared the test site, the Venturi scientist seemed unusually quiet. Something's troubling you, Nadia observed, adjusting the resonance enhancer settings. Elder Thylux's resistance. It comes from fear, not malice. Rilith explained, their crystal filaments chiming softly. Our connection to the forests defines us. Some fear that accepting outside help means losing part of who we are. Nadia paused in her work, considering this. What do you think? I think survival requires adaptation, Rilith replied, their internal light pulsing thoughtfully. The first crystals that became conscious and began walking, our ancestors, they didn't fear change. They embraced it. The next morning, as the purple sun rose over the crystal forest, a small group gathered around the test site. The chosen sapling stood about waist-high, its crystalline structure already showing early signs of the decay that plagued the forest. Nadia triple-checked every setting on her device, while Elder Thylux watched with obvious skepticism. The moment of truth had arrived. Beginning harmonic resonance in 3, 2, 1. She activated the enhancer, holding her breath as it emitted a barely audible hum. At first, nothing seemed to happen. Then, gradually, the sapling began to shine brighter. Its crystal structure appeared to strengthen, the dull patches clearing like fog burning away in sunlight. The transformation was subtle but unmistakable. Remarkable, Rilith whispered, their own crystalline form resonating in harmony with the rejuvenated sapling. Elder Thylux moved closer, examining the sapling with intense scrutiny. Their crystal filaments chimed in a complex melody that Nadia couldn't quite interpret. Finally, they turned to her. "You understand that this is only a preliminary test," the elder stated, though their tone had softened slightly. "We will need to monitor this sapling for at least a full lunar cycle before considering broader implementation." "Of course," Nadia agreed quickly. "We can use this time to refine the technology and ensure it fully complements traditional crystal tending methods." As the group dispersed, Director Duran lingered behind with Nadia. "Well done," he said quietly. "You're beginning to understand that saving the crystal forests isn't just about science. It's about bridging two very different ways of seeing the world." Nadia nodded, watching Rylith engage in an animated discussion with some younger crystal keepers. "The Ventari have so much to teach us about harmony and balance. If we can combine that wisdom with our technology, then perhaps we can achieve something truly extraordinary." Duran finished. "Keep building those bridges, Dr. Patel. One small step at a time." That evening, as Nadia updated her research logs, she reflected on how far they'd come and how far they still had to go. The success with the sapling was promising, but scaling up the solution would present new challenges. Yet watching the renewed light shine from that single crystal plant had filled her with fresh determination. The crystal forests could be saved. She just had to prove it, one small victory at a time. The warning came without preamble. Dr. Marcus Rivera burst into the research lab, his dark eyes wide with urgency. "Nadia, we have a serious problem. The system's star is showing signs of imminent solar activity, massive solar flares, unlike anything we've recorded in this sector." Nadia looked up from her work with the resonance enhancer, immediately noting the gravity in her colleague's expression. "How bad are we talking about?" "Bad enough that it could completely destabilize the crystal forest's harmonic frequency," Marcus replied, pulling up a holographic projection of the star's activity. "The radiation surge alone could shatter the more fragile sections." Before Nadia could respond, Rylith burst into the lab, their crystalline form pulsing with agitated light patterns. "Dr. Patel, the elders have called an emergency council. They request your presence immediately." The council chamber was alive with the discordant chiming of agitated Ventari. Elder Thylux stood at the center, their usually brilliant form dimmed with concern. Director Duran was already present, deep in discussion with several crystal keepers. "The storm approaches faster than anticipated," Elder Thylux announced as Nadia entered. "Our protective harmonics cannot shield the entire forest. We face the loss of generations of growth within hours." "What about the resonance enhancer?" Nadia stepped forward, her mind racing. "If we could modify it to create a broader harmonic shield." "One small device cannot protect an entire forest," another elder interrupted, their crystal filaments chiming sharply. "No, but a network of them might." Rylith spoke up, moving to stand beside Nadia. "Dr. Patel's device works by amplifying and stabilizing natural crystal frequencies. If we could create a grid of enhancers, using the forest's own crystalline structure as a conduit." Nadia's eyes widened as she caught Rylith's meaning. "The crystal trees themselves could become part of the shield, but we'd need to act fast, and we'd need every available hand." Elder Thylux studied them both intently, their internal light flickering with rapid calculations. "The risk is considerable. If the network fails, the feedback could shatter not only the forest, but any Ventari connected to it. And if we do nothing, we lose everything for certain." Rylith countered. Their crystal form pulsed with conviction. "I volunteer to help establish the network." "As do I." Keeper Zena stepped forward, her younger crystalline form bright with determination. One by one, other Ventari joined them, until nearly half the chamber had volunteered. Director Duran cleared his throat. "The human staff will assist in whatever way we can. Dr. Rivera can help calculate the optimal placement points for the enhancers." Elder Thylux's crystal filaments chimed a complex melody, a sound Nadia had never heard before. "Then we have no choice but to proceed. May the wisdom of our ancestors guide us." What followed was a blur of activity. The station's fabrication units worked at maximum capacity, producing modified resonance enhancers while teams of humans and Ventari spread out through the forest. Nadia found herself working alongside Relith, their movements synchronized as they installed device after device. The storm's leading edge will hit in less than an hour. Marcus's voice crackled over the comm. The network needs to be operational before then. Nadia wiped sweat from her brow, checking the connections on another enhancer. The purple sky above had taken on an ominous red tinge, and she could feel a strange vibration in the crystal trees around them. Rilith, how are the harmonics holding? She called out to her partner, who was interfacing directly with a massive crystal trunk. The frequency is stable, but we'll need more power to maintain the shield. Rilith responded, their voice strained. The Ventari will need to channel our own energy into the network. Is that safe? Nadia asked, concerned by the fatigue already showing in Rilith's dimming light. We have no choice, they replied simply. Our lives are bound to the forest. We will give what we must. As the storm approached, all non-Ventari personnel were ordered back to the station. Nadia fought the evacuation order until Director Juran physically pulled her away. You've done all you can, he insisted. Now it's up to them. From the observation deck, Nadia watched in awe as the Ventari joined hands around the forest's perimeter, their crystalline forms glowing brighter and brighter. The network of enhancers pulsed in sync with their energy, creating a shimmering dome of harmonic protection, just as the first solar flares struck. The sky erupted in crimson fury. Radiation levels spiked off the charts as wave after wave of solar energy bombarded the shield. The Ventari stood firm, their combined energy feeding the protective barrier even as the storm tried to tear it apart. Hours passed in tense vigil. Nadia never left the observation deck, monitoring readings and watching for any sign of failure in the network. The forest itself seemed to glow from within, every crystal tree a conductor in this massive symphony of survival. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the storm began to pass. As the sky gradually cleared, Nadia held her breath, waiting to see what remained of the forest and her friends. The aftermath of the solar storm revealed something unexpected. The crystal forest wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. Where the harmonic shield had channeled the storm's energy, new growth sparkled with unprecedented vitality. The combined power of Ventari essence and human technology had transformed potential devastation into remarkable renewal. Nadia walked through the glittering forest alongside Elder Thylux, documenting the changes. The Elder's crystalline form had regained its brilliance after several days of recovery, though many Ventari still showed signs of fatigue from their ordeal. I must admit, Elder Thylux's chimes carried a note of humility. Your resonance enhancers proved more valuable than I anticipated. Perhaps there is wisdom in embracing new methods when they are applied with respect for our traditions. The technology only worked because of Ventari knowledge, Nadia replied, pausing to examine a cluster of newly formed crystal formations. Without your people's connection to the forest, the shield would have failed. They reached a clearing where Rylith and a team of human scientists were studying a particularly vigorous section of new growth. The crystal trees here seemed to pulse with their own internal light, creating patterns unlike anything previously recorded. The merger of the storm's energy with our harmonic frequencies has created something entirely new, Rylith explained, their voice filled with excitement. These crystals exhibit properties we've never seen before. They're more resilient, more adaptable, almost as if they've evolved. Dr. Marcus Rivera looked up from his readings, his face animated. The molecular structure has been fundamentally altered. These new formations could revolutionize our understanding of crystalline life forms. More than that, Keeper Zena added, her young crystalline form resonating with the new growth. They're teaching us new songs. The harmonics are different, more complex, beautiful. Director Juran, who had been quietly observing, stepped forward. This seems like an opportunity to establish something more permanent. A joint research initiative, perhaps. A place where human and Ventari scientists could work together to understand these changes and protect the forest's future. Elder Thylux's crystal filaments chimed thoughtfully. You propose a formal partnership. This would be unprecedented. The storm proved we're stronger together, Nadia pointed out. And there's so much we could learn from each other, not just about crystal preservation, but about harmony, adaptation, growth. The elder turned to address the gathered group, their form casting rainbow patterns across the clearing. When we first accepted human assistance, some feared it would diminish our connection to the forest. Instead, it has deepened our understanding. Perhaps this is the path forward our ancestors prepared us for. Over the next few weeks, plans for the joint initiative took shape. The station's laboratories were redesigned to accommodate both species' needs, while new residential areas were constructed to house the expanding research team. Nadia found herself working closely with Rylith to develop a curriculum that would combine Ventari crystal-tending wisdom with human scientific methodology. It's remarkable, Rylith observed one evening as they reviewed their progress. The forest's new growth patterns mirror our own evolution, separate elements coming together to create something stronger. Nadia smiled, watching the play of light through her friend's crystalline form. I've been thinking about what you said when I first arrived, about how your ancestors emerged from these forests. Maybe this is another kind of emergence, not of a single species, but of a shared future. Their work was interrupted by an excited call from Marcus. You need to see this. The new crystal formations, they're responding to human presence in ways we never expected. They hurried to his location, where a group of young crystal trees seemed to be reaching toward the human researchers, their branches creating intricate patterns of light and shadow. It's as if they're trying to communicate. Keeper Zena whispered, her own form resonating with the display. They recognize humans not as outsiders, but as part of the forest's extended family. The implications were staggering. If the crystal forest itself was adapting to embrace human presence, it suggested possibilities far beyond their initial goals of preservation. This wasn't just about saving an ecosystem. It was about forging a genuine symbiosis between two vastly different forms of life. Director Duran watched the proceedings with satisfaction. When we established this station, we hoped for cooperation. Instead, we're witnessing transformation. Both our species are changing, growing together in ways we never imagined possible. As the purple sun set, casting the forest in ethereal light, Nadia reflected on how far they'd come. The crisis had tested them, but it had also revealed their true strength, not in isolation, but in unity. The bridges they were building weren't just between humans and Ventari, but between different ways of seeing, thinking, and being. 1 year after the great solar storm, Harmonia Station had transformed beyond recognition. The once simple research facility had blossomed into the galaxy's first human Ventari scientific academy, its crystalline spires now interwoven with Earth architecture in a stunning display of collaborative design. Nadia stood at her favorite observation point, watching new students arrive. Young humans and Ventari moved together through the academy's halls, their excited chatter mixing with the melodic chiming of crystal communications. Each group was learning the other's ways of understanding the world, creating something entirely new in the process. Reflecting on how far we've come, Rylith's familiar chimes brought a smile to her face. Her friend's crystalline form had grown more intricate over the past year, developing patterns that seemed to bridge traditional Ventari structure with more Earth-inspired geometries. Hard to believe this all started with a desperate attempt to save a dying forest, Nadia replied, turning to face her research partner. Now look at it. The crystal forest stretched to the horizon, more vibrant than ever. The hybrid crystals that had emerged after the storm had continued to evolve, creating new formations that defied traditional classification. Some even exhibited signs of basic consciousness, much like the first crystalline entities that had given rise to the Ventari species. Elder Thylux is ready for the ceremony, Director Duran announced, approaching them with Marcus and Keeper Zena in tow. The Council of Elders has officially approved the expansion proposal. They made their way to the Grand Chamber, where representatives from both species had gathered. The room itself was a testament to their partnership, human environmental controls working in harmony with Ventari crystalline technology to create the perfect conditions for both species to thrive. Elder Thylux stood at the center, their form radiating with formal dignity. 1 year ago, they began, their chimes reaching every corner of the chamber. We faced extinction. Today, we celebrate rebirth, not just of our crystal forests, but of our understanding of what is possible when different forms of life choose to grow together. The elder gestured to a crystalline pedestal, where a unique formation pulsed with inner light. This new growth represents something unprecedented, a true hybrid of Ventari crystal and earth-based biological processes. Dr. Patel, would you explain its significance? Nadia stepped forward, her heart racing with excitement. What you're seeing is the first successful fusion of human DNA with crystalline matrices. While still in its early stages, this breakthrough suggests the possibility of creating environments that could naturally sustain both our species. Imagine planets where humans and Ventari could live together without the need for artificial environmental controls. A murmur of excitement rippled through the chamber. Marcus pulled up a holographic display, showing the hybrid crystal's internal structure. The implications go beyond just shared habitats. These formations could revolutionize everything from space travel to medical treatment. They're teaching us entirely new ways of thinking about the relationship between organic and inorganic life. But perhaps more importantly, Rylith added, their chimes carrying clear emotion. They represent the future our children will inherit, not as separate species working together, but as true partners in the evolution of galactic civilization. Keeper Zena, who had become one of the Academy's most promising instructors, stepped forward with a group of students. Already, our youngest learners show an intuitive understanding of both crystalline harmonics and human scientific principles. They don't see boundaries between our ways of knowing. They see opportunities for synthesis. The ceremony concluded with the planting of a new hybrid crystal in the Academy's central courtyard. As Nadia watched human and Ventari students working together to establish its root system, she felt a profound sense of completion. This was why she had come to Harmonia Station, not just to save something precious, but to help create something new. You know, Director Juren said quietly, standing beside her, when we first recruited you, we hoped you might find a way to preserve the crystal forests. Instead, you've helped forge a path to the future. Nadia watched as the newly planted crystal began to pulse with life, its light patterns reflecting the combined influence of both species. The future was always here, she replied. We just had to learn how to grow toward it together. As the purple sun set on another day at Harmonia, the crystal forests sang their ancient songs, now enriched with new harmonies. In labs and classrooms throughout the Academy, humans and Ventari continued their shared work of discovery, and in the spaces between their differences, something beautiful continued to grow, a legacy of light that would illuminate the way forward for generations to come. High above the Academy, the twin stars of the Bostis system shone down on this experiment in cooperation, their light refracted through countless crystal spires into rainbow patterns that seemed to whisper of possibilities yet to come. The strange responsibility that had brought Nadia to this distant world had evolved into something far greater, a shared commitment to writing the next chapter in the story of life itself.